We're starting to see how Trump is going to administer his version of politics. I just want to take a second to talk about tribalism and how we got here, how we got to this point. I recently had an altercation, if you will, with somebody that I really look up to. And it kind of made me think about how people are so polarized and divided based on political beliefs. Even people who say that they are not particularly religious, these are people who, when it comes to politics, act almost in a fundamentalist way. There's some hypocrisy there. And none of us are perfect. None of us have the answers. But I have my own criticisms of the two-party system that we have. You know, I was trying to inform them about my beliefs revolving around politics in this country, and just from a historical perspective, how politics have been manipulated and utilized to put one group of people in power while taking power from another group of people. So there has to be a winner and there has to be a loser. And no political system that has true winners and true losers can really thrive, because the people who lose, if their ideas about how to live are not catered to, and if those people are relegated to the margins of society, then no one wins. It's only a matter of time before the people who don't have the power that they need find a way to rise up. And then there's trouble for the entire constituency, the entire national constituency. So I'm going to read a piece called "Why I Didn't Vote for Kamala or Donald." And this will give people perspective into why people who don't vote, at least some of us. So why I didn't vote for Kamala or Donald. Can we reimagine politics in an era of grotesque tribalism? You don't listen, you dumb fuck. You think you're so smart. You didn't even vote, so you have no right to speak about politics. Kamala lost, and it's because of people like you. I was recently accosted with these words by someone I used to look up to during one of their angry tirades, of which there have been plenty since I've known this individual. Our conversation began cordially enough, until after being coerced, I began to define my political position and provide my reasoning for never having voted in a US election. Immediately after I began, this individual moved to cut me off and commenced to insult my intelligence. I attempted repeatedly to state my position, but was continuously shut down. And then I heard the cold, decisive doo-doo of an abruptly ended call. I was frenetic, my pulse racing. Though in disbelief that someone I saw as a friend and even mentor could treat me like this, I wasn't angry. My thoughts about our current political milieu were simply confirmed at that moment. Humans are deeply polarized into their own tribalistic echo chambers of dogma, and everyone is sure that they're right. It's nothing new to say that we live in a global society characterized by not just tribalism. Today, men are pitted against women in gender wars, countries war with each other over resources, religious sects continue to destroy each other based on their differing interpretations of God. Political parties engage in savage, propagandistic tactics to prop up their own group and vilify the other for political gain, and there seems to be no end in sight, even in light of President-elect Trump's ascendancy into the office of the executive. I don't profess to be a pundit or world historian. However, I read and write lots for my own musings and in my capacity as an English composition and rhetoric graduate student at an R1 institution. My verbal facility, something I've been honing intentionally for the last decade, has taught me that words have meaning and power. I've also learned that empathy is perhaps humanity's only way out of the shithole it currently inhabits. To this end, at the risk of alienating many of those who read or listen to this writing, I'd like to briefly outline my thoughts around why I've never voted and why I see voting in US electoral politics as silent complicity with imperial power and the disintegration of the human spirit. I begin from a basic pretext that choosing not to vote is just as much a demonstration of political sovereignty as voting is, and perhaps it is an even greater show of it. I feel I must speak on this topic as it lies heavy on my heart. Note, this piece will not address the massively flawed institution that is the Electoral College. I tend to prefer the idea of ranked choice voting and its pluralistic outcomes, as they're more representative of a genuine democracy. Perhaps I'll write about this or make a video at another time. Two sides, one agenda. When I began to read and study geopolitics seriously in 2007, I became frustrated with what I saw as the endless cycle of human torment and suffering in the name of acquiring power. War, poverty, destitution, and human devolution seemed to be the recurring themes associated with man's attempt to socially engineer his way into a just society for all. It didn't matter which side of the political spectrum one was on. You could be on the nationalistic Hitlerian center-right or on the Marxist-Stalinist center-left. The end result was always the same throughout history. In pursuit of a well-functioning social order, mankind's most egomaniacal political figures eventually found themselves in opposition to the very social orders they sought to create. I then realized that Martin Luther King Jr.'s statement about the moral arc of the universe bending towards justice required a deeper analysis. Mainly, who decides what is just? Clearly, for example, the United States system of mass incarceration reflects the idea that there are at least two opposing ideas about what constitutes justice. On one hand, perhaps modern white conservatives believe that if the state locks someone up for a crime, then the state has absolute authority and supremacy in administering justice. Never mind any question of whether the laws in our books are morally legitimate. Never mind any allowance for nuance in individual circumstances. On the other hand, modern white and minority liberals may possess a more nuanced understanding of how the very economic and social system that American citizens are subsumed under creates the very conditions that catalyze the likelihood someone may be imprisoned. Yet, these same liberals, instead of trying to abolish the national prison system in totality, only try and legislate fairer sentences, more humane treatment of prisoners, and reforms to capitalism. In other words, these liberal minds still support oppression, only a softer form of it. And on any given day, any one of us might find ourselves on either the conservative or liberal side of justice. This is only one example of how our views about what is socially right or acceptable differ depending on circumstance and who is affected. In regard to the individual who levied the vitriolic attack on me, their unwavering allegiance to the Democratic Party was evocative of an almost religious fundamentalism. As a result, they assailed me for not demonstrating undying loyalty and support for Kamalaharris and the Democrats. The fact that I didn't endorse Kamala as my personal political lord and savior irked this individual to no end. Ironically, they were of the opinion that if I wasn't going to vote for Kamala, I had no reason to vote at all. Not very democratic, is it? That said, I am no fan of Donald Trump. I don't think I need to go into great detail about why. Likely, if you're reading or listening to this, whether you voted for him or not, you know very well his lack of a genuine political ideology, preoccupation with racist populist whites and capitalist acquisition, and his disregard for global citizenry. I would not cast a vote for him in a million years. But both candidates this election cycle supported the continuing wholesale slaughter of innocent Palestinian men, women, and children. Even so, I continue to hear the same tired argument about the lesser of two evils, as if given a choice between drinking urine, Kamala, and eating poop, Trump, I'm necessarily required to consume urine, since everyone else is doing it. I can acknowledge that Kamala is the better prepared of the two candidates without giving her my full endorsement. After all, Kamala is a decorated attorney. She has been involved in the political process. She understands how laws are made, how decisions are made. I personally think that presidential candidates should all have passed the bar. You should be eligible to practice law in the given state that you're from or representing. There's just no reason that someone should be in a political office where laws are being made and not have an understanding of the legal process, jurisdiction, legal precedent. These things to me are paramount for having someone who's going to be ahead of the state. As I said, I can acknowledge Kamala is the better prepared of the two candidates without giving her my full endorsement. American citizens like me, more or less anarchist-minded in nature, can give Democrats and Republicans their flowers in instances where they deserve them, and just as soon take them away when they promote, wittingly or unwittingly, evils within society. Now, a bit earlier, I mentioned abolishment of the prison system. And this is a very complex topic to talk about. It requires knowledge of prison systems, corporal punishment, of what is legal, what is morally acceptable in a society. And so one can't just say, take away the prisons and then not give an explanation for that. So I'm not going to go too deep into that into this video, but the idea is basically the systems and structures that we have that cause someone to be incarcerated need to be analyzed under a microscope, because there are so many instances where someone gets locked up and they have no recourse to get themselves out of that position. They end up becoming tangled in the legal system for not being able to pay fees, for not having adequate representation. Sometimes people are lied on. Sometimes people don't get notices so that they know that they have to be summoned for court. There's just all types of issues and problems that happen. And there are all kinds of draconian laws on the books throughout the states that make it very easy for someone to end up in prison. And not just that, but for a very long time. We recently witnessed the killing of Marcellus Williams, who was an innocent man. The family of the victim said that they didn't want him to die. The prosecution, people who prosecuted him said, "We think we got it wrong. We should stay this guy's execution." And the governor still allowed the execution to go through. I believe firmly that the prison system needs to be abolished, and that the only way to do that, though, is to analyze our social structures and see where crime is committed based on the kinds of structures that we have, the kinds of systems that we have. Many times people are just trying to live or just trying to get by. If you have food, clothing, and shelter, and adequate access to healthcare or education, things like that, then you're not trying to commit a crime or rob your neighbor or participate in other injustices. And ironically enough, you have billionaires and millionaires who commit fraud. People like Bernie Madoff, who are representative of a social structure that allows super wealthy people to levy power, levy their own thoughts and ideas about how to run society onto the masses through financial institutions. There's problems with that as well. My central point is that the answer to solving our issues around crime and moral wrongs isn't just to throw people away into prisons and lock them up. That's very barbaric. Humans are meant to walk the planet freely, and we have to start paying attention to how society itself contributes to the amount of people that get locked away in prisons. U.S. politics reimagined. You might have guessed by now that my political critique is of the nation state itself, its mechanisms of control masquerading as order, its preoccupation with perpetuating itself through increasingly destructive technological advances and surveillance of its citizenry, and its pretensions at preserving peace while simultaneously creating, through reliance on capital acquisition, ever more poverty. Both Democrats and Republicans are guilty of the latter. Concessions, while worth fighting for since they pushed the state to its eventual collapse, should not give us cause to settle in our cushiony recliners. Child tax credits, reduced prison sentences, lower mandatory prison minimums, federal lawsuits against egregious corporate offenders, these are all great. Citizens should continue to push for these measures. And generally, Democrats have led the charge for these changes. However, one cannot ignore the tendency towards erosion of individual sovereignty that occurs as a result of larger government programs. Liberals seek a perpetuation of the state, typically through the cultural, physical, economic, and social destruction of human beings the world over. Example given, global supercorporatism, the IMF and World Bank predatory lending practices in Africa and the global South. So, when someone says to me that they didn't vote, my eyes actually light up a bit in curiosity. I begin to wonder if they see what I see, know what I know, and feel what I feel about the system we live under. I get excited at the possibility that maybe, just maybe, they have relinquished their childish need to suck on the tit that is unabashed tribalism. MLK made a speech at Southern Methodist University in March of 1966, shortly before he died. I'll leave you with a few of his words to ponder the next time you consider casting a vote in our system of politics. Quote, "I never intend to adjust myself to segregation and discrimination. I never intend to become adjusted to a religious bigotry. I never intend to adjust myself to economic conditions that will take necessities from the many to give luxuries to the few, leaving millions of people smothering in an airtight cage of poverty in the midst of an affluent society. I never intend to adjust myself to the madness of militarism and the self-defeating effects of physical violence." Thank you for listening. This idea of people being tribally polarized into their camps and just knowing for sure that they're right is going to lead America to its eventual downfall. No one wants that. We all would prefer that while we're running the so-called race, that we can self-correct as we go along so that we don't need to see a complete collapse of an entire structure. And so I'm not sure that that is even possible, because history says that all great empires fall. We need to be very careful about alienating ourselves from other people based on their ideologies and their philosophies. At the end of the day, we all need the same basics, resources, and the love and care of other individuals to survive. So no matter what you believe, at the end of the day, I still need you and you still need me. That's a great basic philosophy to walk the planet with. Anyway, thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.